I don't have a flash presentation. I don't have a PowerPoint even. I am currently in the throes of my busiest period of the year, but anyway, I'll just go through who I am, what I do. I'm the biosecurity lead at Hawke's Bay Regional Council. I've got a team of 9 staff, and we deal with plant pests, animal pests, marine pests, work for the whole region. I kind of got asked here to give a bit of an update and also touch on some river-related stuff, but I'll start from the top. So Chilean Needle Grass has been in Hawke's Bay since roughly about the 1930s. It's a sustained control pest, which is, I guess, the lowest designation of importance in our regional pest management plan, but still carries responsibilities from our end, and also we impose responsibilities on our landowners to control needlegrass. We're sitting in Hawke's Bay at about 320 or so properties for needlegrass. If you added up all of the area that's infested, it's about 800 hectares. We consistently find more every year, basically because we've had a little bit of a shake-up in terms of our team. We've got a couple more people, so we're doing a lot more surveillance, get word of mouth from local landowners. But the big one for us that increases our workload is actually subdivision. Much of our needlegrass infestations are on smaller holdings. We start out with a big block. It's one block. It turns into 3, turns into 5, 10, and so on. However, we did only find 2 properties last year, and they're both late in our season, which for us, it's from October 25th to Christmas Day, basically. But yeah, we'd be foolish to think that there's not more out there somewhere. Our furthest north infestation is in a place called Bayview, which is about 10 minutes north of Napier, and our furthest south is in a place called Porongaho, right at our regional boundary, and this one's quite isolated. The vast majority of the rural type blocks where the needlegrass is pretty steep and I guess poorer quality land. One thing that we do is we have a subsidy scheme where we can subsidise control costs 50-50 up to a value of about $3,000. So say you've got a $6,000 job, we'll pay $3K, the landowner pays $3K, but if it's $7,000, then the landowner pays an extra $1,000. We've now dropped that to $2,000 owing to budget pressures. We've had 1,100 hours done on needlegrass just by staff in the last year. So when the subsidy scheme is sort of entered into by a landowner, they basically that automatically means they're getting a contractor in because that's what you're paying for. But staff do a lot of control on roadsides. We do it on roadsides, do it on smaller holdings. Yeah, it's kind of at our discretion, but generally the really big ones we just can't manage ourselves, so we lean on the landowners a little bit there. So it's hard to sort of quantify hectareage increase, but as far as property number increase, it's at around about 10% per year. And I guess the weird thing is a lot of the stuff that Noel and Liam have been saying is not unique to their regions. One thing interesting is that some people are just completely apathetic to needlegrass, saying, yep, it's everywhere. And you have to sort of try and explain to them that, hey, you're actually not doing this just for you. You're doing this for your neighbours so that your neighbours don't get it. As far as comms go, we do a media release just before the season starts. Doing quite a lot of public advocacy. I mean, 7 staff pretty much drive around constantly, checking contractors' work, doing control, talking to people, doing surveillance, arranging farm visits, doing machinery inspections, fairly long list of things that they do. So they're fairly visible in that season period. But machine inspections happen all year round. We used to do quite a lot of public advocacy, but we've taken a break for a couple of years because we had Cyclone Gabrielle, a huge event for the region, widespread devastation, and yeah, a lot of trauma out there in the community, and a lot of people needing a place to put that trauma. So some of that public advocacy stuff, like doing A&P shows and things, that actually became a health and safety issue post-cyclone. So yeah, it's disappointing, but I think the dust has died down that we're going to start doing that again this coming season. As far as community-led advocacy in Hawke's Bay, it's broadly lacking. You get the very occasional farmer who's keen as mustard, but they can't muster up enough other farmers who are also keen. My intention for this coming year is to start pushing information out on needlegrass through our, I guess, catchment group collectives, of which there are starting to become quite a few in Hawke's Bay. All of the landowners that have got needlegrass get a pathway management document at the beginning of the season, basically outlining what they can and can't do, both in the seeding period and year round. It's got rules around baking hay, moving stock off of property, machinery inspections, where the stock can go once it's sold. There's quite a few things that are in there, and that's something that we'll monitor compliance with as time goes by. Generally speaking, I think the hardest one to get is actually stock. The easiest one is probably machinery inspections, because quite often a person will be driving around doing surveillance or rushing from property to property, and they will see a machine in a place it shouldn't be, and then they'll just whip in there and basically explain, hey, this machine needs to be inspected. It can't leave the property until we have. And yeah, there's quite a few hours that get spent on machinery inspections. But I think the broad trend for that is actually going down a bit. I think we spent 70 odd hours on machinery inspections last year. But for us, Cyclone Gabrielle did impact the management of needlegrass. And I think the big thing that we're dealing with that maybe other regions are not with needlegrass is that it's in some of our rivers. So in early 2019, we first identified needlegrass in the lower reaches of the Tukituki River, which drains most of central Hawke's Bay and comes into the sea about 20 k's south of Napier. So you guys identified the lower part of that down there in the channel. And then later that year, it was identified in further places, because it was sort of, we waited for the season for that season when we found it was a tail end of 2018 into early 2019, and then we went, right, well, this whole catchment needs surveyed, the Waipawa and the Tukituki. And Waipawa is a tributary of the Tukituki, which also drains a part of Central Hawke's Bay, and more needlegrass was identified. When we kind of found it, we were sort of thinking, well, what can we do to, like, what are our risks here? What do we need to be doing? And we started out by giving gravel extractors a lot of information around not moving needlegrass around knowingly, and putting things in their consents to require machinery inspections once they leave a site where they've been doing their work. And it was going well for a little while, and then a couple of bad eggs spoiled things, and we didn't have much choice. But in December 2020, a ban was then issued on gravel extraction in the Tukituki River up to its confluence with the Waipawa, owing to the presence of needlegrass in some places and the possible presence of needlegrass in others. So for people that had stockpiles on the sides of the rivers, they basically had to apply for an exemption to move that material, but any new extraction was banned. So yeah, there was a lot of angst from the extractors at that time, and can understand why. Their livelihood in that particular area was kind of just cut off at the knees. So yeah, there was a lot of angst there at that time. And so more surveillance was done in the rivers. And then in 2021, central government came up with a project called the IRG project, which I think stands for Infrastructure Reference Group. So basically what that was central government subsidised gravel removal in harder to reach places. And what I mean by hard to reach, it's more just, is it economically viable for an extractor to want to go there? And for most of those catchments, especially in the ban zone, access isn't easy enough to make $1. So the IRG process then, I mean, we had all this money, council had all this money and needed to spend it to get gravel out of the rivers in places where it was, I guess, under extracted. So what it sort of led to was a whole lot of really, really highly monitored extractions at sites deemed lower risk based on the data and the surveillance that we've sort of done, complete with a lot of machinery washdowns, a lot of limitations on what they could do with the gravel, had to use it for the likes of drainage fill, or straight to concrete. Extractors had to submit management plans to us, detailing all of the risk mitigation measures that they were going to put in, and quite often we would turn them down because they weren't good enough, or we would ask for more detail. So yeah, that was a big chunk of work for my broader team, because we had to kind of manage it in-house as well with our asset management department, who are responsible for the riverbeds and managing the river assets. But the project wasn't just about moving bulk volumes of gravel, it was just hitting spots with a surplus that were hard to get access to. And, these were all kind of stopgap measures because the ban, broadly speaking, was still in place. But the extractions were in places informed by the data of the surveillance to be the lowest possible risk that we could sort of manage, and with end users that basically limited spread to zero, like house foundations or underground piping. So then what we ended up having to do was conduct more surveys of those river systems over a long period. It ran for about 3 years. So we do that in the seeding period for the needle grass season. We'd survey the berms and the channel, build up a picture of the infestation levels, and then just keep using that data to inform our future decision making, because the ban was kind of slapped on, but it didn't really match up with what we were finding out there. There were huge sections of both those rivers that we never saw a needle grass plant in. Not one single one, but because the earlier decision was made, we had to sort of stick to that. So I guess the thing that was still sort of unanswered was questions still needed answering around, well, gravel removal, what's the actual likelihood of it containing viable seed? I guess not the relative likelihood. So we started talking to Ag Research in 2021, I'm pretty sure, to conduct a scoping report on a seed survival experiment. So basically what that was, well, will needle grass survive commercial crushing processes? And, but the cost was prohibitive, so commissioning the experiment was denied then. And then, there's a lot more questions. When are the rivers going to be open again from the community? Still significant questions, but that question still sort of sat unanswered. Proposal then got reshaped, and a lot of regional councils have issues with weed migration problems in their river systems. So it sort of made sense to widen the scope of the experiment to, I guess, inform future management across the board, not just for needle grass and not just for Hawke's Bay. We've all got a huge interest in this issue. And then for us, obviously, Gabriel hit, like I said before, huge devastation, a lot of community pressure of a movement on this particular gravel issue in Central Hawke's Bay. Central Hawke's Bay was quite well affected by flooding. And yeah, also a new issue came up in the form of silt deposits. Obviously, the ban was still in place, and people desperately needed to start recovering from this, recovering their land, recovering their farm infrastructure. And councils needed gravel for road repairs, stop bank repairs, bridge pilings. Landowners needed it for their farm tracks and like stock troughs and things like that, just to fix that, get them back to basics. So after some debate, some thought, we issued what's known as a controlled area notice. So there's no rule in our plan around a regional, no rule in our RPMP around movement of risk goods particularly, which is what the gravel was, because there was still an element of uncertainty about the gravel, whether it was guaranteed to contain needle grass no matter where you went. So the controlled area notice was introduced to provide some regulation of the issue while still allowing people to recover, still limiting end uses, limiting areas where people could take gravel from, And the area that was covered by the notice, the controlled area, was an area where needle grass had never ever been found in gravel from the surveys, and with very, very little found on berms or adjacent stop banks. And over time, we kind of started out a bit hard, I think. The notice went through multiple revisions and re-releases when we identified what the community needed, while still trying to run this really delicate balancing act as far as the needle grass issue. People had to apply, they had to say what they were going to do with it. It was only going to get approved if it was directly related to cyclone recovery. So yeah, some guys were declined because they were trying to get gravel for subdivisions and things like that. So yeah, it was just a little bit tricky. It was a lot of management around that. So one more survey was done inside the area that was deemed eligible for extraction under the notice. So that marked 4 consecutive seasons when no gravel had no needle grass had ever been found in the gravel. So what we did for that particular area was let the notice expire and open the controlled area up to extraction with no restrictions. We did have one instance of non-compliance though, which was always a danger, where a guy said he was going to use the gravel for something else and to remediate a farm track, and he then used it for the start of building pads for a subdivision. So he got a direction and got made to concrete everything, quick sticks. But obviously after that, the full catchments still weren't opened, and they're still not open. Question of seed survival still needs a formal answer. So we finally got Ag Research commissioned to do this experiment, assessing the seed survival in this commercially processed gravel. And the field component of that work was just completed in April. And at this early stage, from what I've seen, the results are quite promising, but we're still going to wait for a year before we really know what's happening. But it's a start. I think the lessons that we've learned here, you can't stop people from wanting and needing to recover from an event like this, solely based on a biosecurity risk. You have to have some pragmatism around things. You've got to track the material, you've got to track where it goes. Same with the width as well as the gravel. We also had the silt cleanup, which was, tons and tons of silt spread right across Hawke's Bay. And, some of that stuff was not just theorised to spread needle grass, but all of the sites where silt and gravel have been moved to have all been tracked, every single one of them. They're all subject to checking, which they get checked annually. The actual risk of needle grass spreading in silt and gravel appears to be at the low end of the scale from our observations, but definitely not irrelevant. You have to have machinery inspections as part of your program, and the end use has to be mitigated so that it's not just spreading gravel willy-nilly. And from our surveillance in the general season, not necessarily related to gravel, but related to our control season, we haven't found any new properties with needle grass on that have just sprung up, that can directly be attributed to Gabrielle. But with the amount of flooding that happened, there are a lot of properties to look over, and we're slowly ticking through it. And in some places, our infestations were just completely wiped off the map. They don't exist anymore. So yeah, that's, I guess, in the context of this weather that's kind of hit your broader area, I figured that I should speak on kind of the things that we went through in Gabrielle. We're going to carry on with needle grass. Obviously, our regional pest management plan is up for review, a halfway point review pretty shortly. People can submit on the status of needle grass in our plan. But like Liam said in his presentation, even though Hawke's Bay is reasonably big, we're still only at 800 hectares. We're right on the tip of infestation levels. We're not near. We have so much more to lose. And yeah, we're just going to have to keep monitoring things and go from there.